One of the things that our busy human brains find most challenging to do is to sit with whatever it is that we're experiencing. And we see this all the time through the use of distraction tools. And it's something I've talked about a lot across the whole podcast series, or all the different series of the podcast. And those distractions, they can take the form of really classic obvious things like drugs or alcohol or food or shopping or going on our phone and zipping through Facebook or Instagram. Or they can also take the form of more subtle things. So maybe even kind of like shifting our body about when we feel that there's something uncomfortable in a conversation, or changing the topic of a conversation because it's just sort of feeling as though it's raising something inside us that we are not willing to sit with or to allow to manifest with, in whatever way it's asking to be manifested. So this idea of how do we make the space for ourselves to be able to sit with whatever it is that we're feeling. And if you've sort of read any Buddhism, or in fact you are a Buddhist, then you'll be really, really familiar with this concept, this idea of sitting with, rather than trying to resist or push away. And my reflection today is, this isn't just about the challenging stuff. I think we also do it with times of great joy as well. And what actually inspired me to share this reflection was that the writing of the notes that sit underneath this sort of slightly meandering kind of thought process that I'm going through right now. The inspiration to write down those notes was actually me augmenting a moment of intense joy. And in that moment, I was sitting in my bed. I was writing my reflections at the end of the day. It's something that I've been doing since we've moved to Batchbrook Farm. Each evening is just writing down observations, things of natural beauty that I've observed around us, just to capture it, so that I don't forget, because this stuff can just pass us by. And as I was writing them, I just became overwhelmed with this really beautiful, pure sense of joy. And I sat with that feeling. I really relished that feeling. And then something really urged me, pushed me to pick up my phone and sort of jot down in the notes on my phone these thoughts that that I am sharing with you right now. So it's so beautiful, isn't it? Even in the moment of observing how hard it is for us humans to sit with something that's intense, whether it's good or challenging, or feels lovely or challenging, I was still actually breaking a moment that was feeling really lovely. So I'm very aware of this. There's like a kind of a cyclical aspect to this, and so I'm not saying that I've got all the answers at all. I think it's really just more one of those themes that we can just notice and observe and see, well, what's going on for us in that moment. And for me, I think it's, I am often drawn to share my reflections, or to try and make sense of something either in writing or through the podcast episodes, and so that's really what I was doing. But so coming back to this sort of idea of like, so how do we sit with these moments, and why is it that we so often shake off intense feelings? Now, when things are challenging, it's fairly obvious. I would say it's because, our body and our mind, well, our mind particularly, doesn't like to feel anything that might make us uncomfortable. It's endlessly trying to make everything okay. And sometimes it can get a bit misdirected with the techniques that it uses to soothe us. So, like I said before, we might use drugs or alcohol or food or shopping or the internet or whatever to soothe us, rather than just allowing the emotion, the chemical response that we're having to a thought or to an experience to move through us. We instantly turn to a distraction. But as I say, I think we also sometimes do that with times when we're really, really happy. So something that I remember saying a lot when I was a student was, or this is definitely a cigarette conversation, which was basically a way of saying, oh, this is a real sort of settle in and really focus on what we're talking about. And so, we'd sort of go and buy some cigarettes or grab a packet of cigarettes or roll a cigarette, and and use that to kind of to augment the how lovely the feeling of that conversation was, the connection with that other person. But of course, really what that actually did was break the connection. If I had been able just to sort of sit with the feeling of noticing something intense is happening here, and rather than break it by introducing another element, i.e. nicotine, I could just sit here and just really enjoy the fact that this conversation feels important, or it feels powerful, or this connection feels really special with this other person, then that would have actually held that connection much more deeply. So, and certainly in the past, I would have used other drugs like alcohol. I mean, we all, I'm sure, are familiar with that idea that, in order to make something feel even more special, we might open a special bottle of wine or open a bottle of, something fizzy, or eat something that's got lots of sugar and fat in it, because we are trained to see these as tools for making something feel even more special. But my challenge here, or my kind of question here, is that what they're doing? Or are they actually disrupting us from the purity of the feeling of pleasure that we're actually experiencing just from being in that situation? And do we actually need to augment it at all? And is it really a distraction technique to disrupt that sense of intense emotion? And is that actually what we're doing when we introduce another element like cake or champagne or whatever? And kind of another reflection here is that so on the drive home from the New Year's Eve party that we went to this year, I even found myself taking a photograph of a rainbow In fact, it was a double rainbow. It was incredibly beautiful. It was a horrible day to be out in the car, pouring rain. And then I turned my head and there was this phenomenal double rainbow. Just so bright, so clear, coming all the way down to the ground. It was just beautiful. And so I found myself opening the car window, holding my phone out of the window, which isn't actually such a brilliant idea on a motorway in the rain, but anyway, and capturing what this rainbow looked like. Essentially taking a really kind of crappy photograph of something that was astonishingly beautiful. And after I did it, I thought, why on earth did I bother? Why did I feel that in order to make seeing that rainbow, that double rainbow, even more, that by taking a photo, I would somehow sort of give it, an additional kind of component. And it felt actually a bit like using the camera on my phone like a drug in itself. It was this urge to augment it because being with it was somehow not enough. And for some reason, I wasn't able simply to observe the rainbow, to notice the feelings that I had when I saw it, to sit with that feeling of joy and also the sense that it really looked like a very auspicious omen for the year ahead. And so that observation, watching myself take that picture, just made me notice how often I do this, how often I will distract myself from the experience that I'm really having by bringing in something else that just disrupts the experience. So there are I've got two sort of reflections here. One is when things feel challenging, then using Tara Brach's approach of rain can be, incredibly useful. And I used it actually myself this morning when I was meditating. I had some thoughts to do with the health of a loved one, and I recognised the fear that came up when I was thinking about this, as this thought sort of entered into my meditation. And so I employed the rain technique rather than distracting myself from the feeling. I sat with it. So I recognized it, I acknowledged it, I investigated it, and then I nurtured it and nourished it. And that's the rain: recognize, acknowledge, investigate, nourish. And I allowed myself to actually feel the full depth of the sadness and the fear and the anxiety that was coming up when I was thinking about this loved one. And by doing that, I was able to allow those feelings not only to sit with them, but actually to allow them to move through me. And I find that technique incredibly valuable, and it's something that I teach a lot of my coaching clients as well, because I think for so many of us, we have been taught that discomfort is something that we need to move away from rather than allow our bodies just to process the emotion that we're feeling. And I think in terms of the health of our bodies, it's much more beneficial for us, rather than when something feels, whether if we feel anxious or stressed about something, where the cortisol and the adrenaline rise. if we simply distract ourselves from it, then we're not allowing our bodies to actually process those hormones, to process those chemicals effectively, and they can be left just sort of floating around in our body. And ultimately, that is not good for us. So by sitting with them and allowing it to move through in its own time, it actually enables us to process those hormones more effectively, and we can end up genuinely feeling calmer rather than just being distracted and laying like a sticking plaster over the source of anxiety or the feelings of anxiety. And another technique, which I think I've shared in the podcast before actually, but it warrants sharing again, is something that I learned from my very dear friend Abby Lath, who, if you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, you'll know that Abby joined me for some early episodes in season 1. She's an amazing voice work therapist and singer. And one of her techniques is simply to ask herself, what am I looking for? So when she notices herself reaching for something, she'll check in with what am I looking for. So it might be reaching for her phone. What am I looking for? Reaching for a biscuit. What am I looking for? Reaching for a glass of wine. What am I looking for? And I would invite us to sort of almost like deepen that reflection to say, what am I distracting myself from? And that just takes us a little bit further in. And I believe, my sense is that so often when we're reaching for these distractions, it's subconscious. We haven't necessarily even noted or observed that we're feeling uncomfortable, or that we're feeling, overwhelmed with joy. We haven't necessarily noted it. And so we reach for the distraction unconsciously, mindlessly. And so this question of what am I trying to move away from can really help us deepen our awareness of what's our experience right now. So the invitation is to explore this, see what comes up for you, and as ever, I'd be fascinated to hear what your thoughts are about, do you notice yourself breaking your connection with what you're experiencing, with the feelings that you're having in a moment, by reaching for distractions, whether they're positive feelings or more challenging feelings? Have you noticed that in yourself? And if you have, what is it that enables you to come back in and sit with what you're feeling? Or is it something that you find really, really challenging, which would be completely normal, because that's our human condition. We are, our brains, like I said right at the beginning, they're designed to stop us feeling things that are difficult. But that's not necessarily what's ultimately best for the whole of us. So that's today's reflection. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you could follow where my thoughts were going. I had a few very scrappy notes that I'd written, as I said, sitting in my bed on my phone. And it's really interesting with episodes like this. When I start talking, you kind of like start to sort of see, there's this connection and this connection, and And I just hope that it's come across clearly today. So I wish you well, as ever. I hope the rest of your week is calm and peaceful, and that whatever it is that you find yourself sitting with, that you are able to hold yourself with the deepest compassion. Okay, take care, my darlings. I send you a hug and a wave.